Good morning and welcome. This is Wendy at TAASA, and today we're going to do part 3 of the Working with Addicted Survivor webinars. This one is remaining safe and sober. So I want to remind you all that this is going to be an hour. Type in your questions if you need to, and when you're done, an hour after the webinar is done, you will receive a follow-up email, which will contain the post-test, the evaluation, and a link to the PowerPoint and a link to the certificate of attendance. Please fill everything out. Keep the stuff that you need. Thank you for today's attendance. Let's get going. Okay, when I first put this training together, I had originally entitled it Getting Safe and Sober, and that was how it was advertised. And something in me just went, that's wrong. That's not right. I don't know what it is, but there is something there that's not right about that name. Getting Safe and Getting Sober was published in 2005 by the late Patty Bland, who is working with the Alaska Network on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. It is not my intention ever to plagiarize anyone, let alone Patty, and let alone a coalition. I just like to think that I was so impressed and wowed, and to say that great minds sort of kind of work alike, because when Eileen Kelly and I were putting ours together in 2005 and published in 2006, we had to rename it because that's exactly the title that we used. So I think that's why it stayed with me. However, the intent is it looks like plagiarism, and that's not the intent. So I just wanted to clear that up immediately. All right. TAASA is a statewide advocacy organization, the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. And we work to address and eliminate sexual assault and violence through public policy, training, prevention work, and support to programs that serve survivors of sexual violence. And I am with the training department. Okay, getting started. The big book is nothing more than a guide. And I want everybody to think of it as a guide. Some use it as tools. Some use it like a how-to book. I want to be really, really clear that early recovery is confusing. It is about rediscovery, and a lot of people feel like they are 2 years old again. And I think that's normal or natural under the circumstances. The other thing I want to say about the big book is that it was written in 1939 by two well-educated upper middle class gentlemen, white gentlemen. This does not mean that it doesn't have relevant or things in it that are applicable today. I just want to be mindful that over time, values, morals, the way of looking at the world, the way we communicate has changed. And it may be that we can take this and look at the big book and use it as basically a guide and add on our own twist to it that suit us and suit us, meaning the community or the people who are working with and the survivors who are moving through addiction and sexual violence. So weave it together into something that is salient for everyone. All right. I'm going to keep using 12-step language over the course of this webinar. I believe that you're going to hear it if you've never worked or you're not in a 12-step program yourself. The clientele that you work with, the population you work with, are going to use the acronyms, and they're going to use 12-step lingo. And I think it's a way to say that we understand, support, and communicate with the survivor in a way that is what they're learning and what they're doing. Very quickly, I want to go over PTSD and addicted survivors. I did that in the other two. I don't want to do it, but I just want to repeat that recovery from the damage caused by the substance abuse requires abstinence, and the damage interferes with the ability to abstain. And that's the paradox of recovery, and it is also one of the relapse mechanisms or triggers of recovery. The thinking, the stinking thinking, that's a 12-step term. Stinking thinking may be in early recovery that if it feels no better than using, then why the hell am I sober? And that's, again, not a good place to be. All right. An advocate never, ever, 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 ever asks or acts in the role of a sponsor. Ever. You will be asked. You will be asked over and over again. And this is one of those ethical dual relationships that is not appropriate at all. All right? If you hear this complaint from one or more people that they can't get to a meeting, or they can't, for whatever the reasons, or if you live in a rural town or a small community that is not resource rich, especially in 12-step programs, be proactive on behalf of the population that you serve and reach out to some of the local 12-step programs and ask them if they could come once a week or twice a week to your agency. But before you do that, please make sure that you have talked in your agency and know that for an hour and a half, you are going to be able to designate this room and these, talk it through, make an MOU with the agency and an agreement that this is what's going to happen, this is what they're going to do, and what needs to be done. So do that for yourself. All right. The other thing is, even if you are not in recovery, and even if you are in recovery, be prepared to be triggered. It is going to happen. The stuff, the verbal vomiting, and that's a 12-step lingo thing, the verbal vomiting that may happen at the time is will trigger you. You may or may not have had similar situations or know people who've had, and out comes a whole bunch of stuff. So be prepared for that. Take care of yourself. Know how you're going to do some self-care around this. And the other things for survivors, they very well may attend the group that you're attending. Again, especially if you're in a small community or a rural community. And be aware that this is, again, a dual relationship. You cannot be their sponsor. You cannot be their friend. And can you go to another group or just discuss this in general, that what's put in group stays in group, and there's no way that's it. That is it. You are not their recovery person. They're going to do telephone therapy with them. All those things that you are going to do. Okay. I have been asked over and over and over again, and I guess it bears to say that this comes from my experience in working in a TC, a therapeutic community, for 6.5 years. Survivors have always asked me up front, what is normal and where do I begin? I hear these questions and internally my heart breaks, it aches, I want to cry, and then at the same time I want to rejoice. And I want to cry with gladness, because what I hear first is the desperation, the despair, the confusion. I also hear hope and strength and bravery. And that is what I say. I have no idea what normal is. I use the term natural because everybody has natural reactions, and we begin, or you begin, slowly, very, very slowly. All right. Codependency. I've also heard codependency defined as a set of maladapted compulsive behaviors and a great source of emotional pain and stress. There are some of the skills and rules usually come from childhood, and they are coping mechanisms for the survivor to move forward. And some of those rules are, it's not okay to talk about a person's family problems, or we don't wash our problems in public. So if that's something that goes along with that stuffing down and not showing anything, having it bubble up to the surface is going to be painful. It's going to be as if the addict is breaking every single bond that holds them to their family. And so I've been told. Communication is best if it's indirect. This is called triangulation, and it's relying on a third party to deliver the message. The other things is be good, be right, be perfect, don't bring shame to the family. And these survival skills, these rules that are learned, constrict the free and healthy development of people's self-esteem and problem-solving skills, let alone healthy relationships. So I want us to keep that in mind too. What we do know are a lot of these things, and I'm not going to read them, you can read them for yourself, but under the influence, the survivor may feel a sense of increased power, and they feel that they can defend themselves against any physical or verbal or assault or anything. They're powerful, not realizing the impact that the substance has on their perceptions, on their reflexes, and on their gross and fine motor skills. And not using often terrifies them because they feel like they've been stripped of the superpower that they had when they used, and all they have now is their exposed vulnerabilities. I'm going to talk about that a bit more later, but one client said to me, Miss Wendy, it feels like I have to constantly patrol the borders of my territory with my MK-47, which is a horrible visual, and that's what they were feeling, and I'm glad that she could express that. What we also know is that people don't come forward and talk about what they are doing or not doing because they may fear arrest. It feels if the survivor has been involved in any way, shape, and form with any agency before, during, or while they were using or withdrawing, they may be labeled and they're not to be believed. If this is a person going through the immigration process or in the United States without papers, they may also not want to come forward for fear of arrest and deportation. Okay. Survivors have always come in, and the first thing they say to me is happy, joyous, and free. They want to know when that's going to happen for them. And they generally see recovery as a straight line. And it's not. It's more like the bottom tangle. Recovery is extremely messy. And one survivor told me that it's weird getting into recovery at the beginning, and you think it's going to get better and things start moving, and then it gets weirder and you slip or you fall and you get back up and it gets weird again, and it gets weirder and weirder and weirder, and it just keeps going in that direction the whole time. All right. My intention, and I believe all advocates' intention, is not to discourage survivors. It is more to help them navigate a confusing system, and and to navigate it with not only their eyes wide open, but our eyes as well. And we need to understand, as advocates, we need to understand that early sobriety, and I have issues with that word, and again, I'll talk with that later, but that sobriety in general is a roller coaster ride, and it can be of miserable proportions. And not using is going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot. And quite frankly, that hurt happens on every single level of the addict's person, internally and externally. So it's going to be withdrawals on a spiritual level. And the thinking goes something like this: I must have been very bad because I feel like I'm being punished, or I'm punished, or why would I do something so horrible? I don't deserve to have whatever. That goes along with the psychological, but the psychological also, the thinking, the physical act of thinking, if you want to call it that, literally hurts, because the survivor is now assessing areas of the brain that may have not been used in a while. It's more about, who am I if I am not using? Who is this person who is nothing but a sack of vulnerabilities? And it may feel like to the survivor that they are hanging by their fingernails to the edge of a very, very steep cliff. Okay. Socially or socializing, community may have been around the substance use and abuse and the rituals that go around with it, and chasing a drug, chasing the next high. The survivor may now feel isolated with no one to talk to and nothing in common with, quote, those people. And that is pretty common feeling and reaction. All right. The physical is the cravings, the loss of sleep, feeling awful in their own body. The emotional is all the guilt, the shame, the grief, but they come at a rapid pace. It's like that roller coaster of emotions coming and going quickly. And that's what I tell people at the beginning is, this is your body and your brain coming back online, getting healthy. It hurts, it's confusing, but it's also wonderful. And the somatic can be a range of unspecified illnesses, like the body erupting, the skin erupting literally by processing out a bunch of toxins, because who knows what the hell the street drugs have been laced with. It can be due to now you're getting a headache, and your headaches were masked before because of the drug use, and now because you have a headache, you think you have a brain tumor, trauma and drama. You're sneezing because you have allergies, which were sort of mitigated by your drug use, and now you know that you have some horrible terminal disease. That is the trauma, the drama, the over emotional addict behavior that is fairly common for a lot of people. Okay, it's going to hurt on all levels. And again, the substance abuse was their best friend in every single way. This is, and now their life feels like poop. This is, they're going now, where is the promise of this happy, joyous, and free? If advocates don't have accurate information about recovery, and it is the advocate's duty to learn all they can about addiction and pause, and why everything is so important, and to pass this on so that the clients that we work with have the information that they need. All right. Again, early sobriety is not easy. I talk about HALT. This is another 12-step acronym. It stands for hungry, angry, tired, or lonely. Okay? HALT. Survivors are really, really not good at feeling. They disconnect from their bodies. Hunger and thirst are very primitive, natural reactions to what your body needs. It comes from the amygdala, and the body being the best machine, functioning machine, efficient that it is, when it gets triggered by something, it is going to take the most known route to get where it goes. So if you have been stuffing your hunger or your thirst, the body, the unpleasantness of this, the dire need for food or drink in some cases is strong, and the brain senses this as danger, and boom, the trauma reaction is triggered and all those bad cascading neurochemicals happen. So having water, eating throughout the day, grazing, not full meals totally, but grazing and carrying water around to sip in or drink is really, really important. Anger and hunger together create hangry. I know you've all heard the expression, which means bad temper and irritable due to not identifying or taking care of simple needs. And the suggestion for both, again, is like the snacking during the day and staying hydrated. All right. Anger also is a very strong emotion that, again, comes from the amygdala. Getting where I'm going with this and getting where it goes. And I think for part of the 12-step thing, this was brilliant before any of this neuroscience was known. Okay, loneliness is a feeling of not being connected. There is a song, I can't remember who sang it or even the title, and the woman who sings it says, "I am alone, I am not lonely." She's connected to herself internally. But this is where at first a survivor of addictions and sexual assault feel vulnerable. So they feel like they can't regulate their emotions and they're feeling overwhelmed. If they can't regulate themselves, how can they go out in public and make a connection with anyone else? What they're also doing is they're making mental presentations or making vignettes, if you will, in their mind of expectations about what's going on, what they're seeing, and how they could or couldn't fit in. And when that doesn't work out from them, that's pretty sad and tiring for them. And okay, because usually in the past, vulnerability was looked at the survivor's point of view as showing one's soft underbelly, which often needed to be protected at all costs. And even though it may not feel this vulnerability, the way vulnerabilities are, let me rephrase this. What I'm going for is vulnerabilities are often our strengths. If we know and acknowledge them, then we don't have to spend time and energy hiding and defending them. We can grow and make them stronger and know what's coming in and feel protected and connected to ourselves and focus on other things that we want to do. So what it causes when you feel that lonely and you feel that vulnerable is that you have to be hypervigilant all the time to patrol the border of who you are, to make sure that there is no incoming. And being tired results from all these, everything that's happening in early recovery, of detoxing, of getting out, of not sleeping well, of feeling emotionally and physically drained. And so making sure that there's safe places to speak, that you establish a bedtime routine, that you can get calm and centered before going to bed is going to help the survivor at this point a lot. What we forget at this point in time is the very common triggers that happen, everyday common triggers that we may not think about, like payday. What is the significance of money in the survivor's life? Was it part of their ritual for use? Did they work? Some of them may have, some of them may not. What does it signify for them, and what were the triggers, and what do they need to do? When I say neighborhood, I'm saying where are they going to live, or where did they live? And now that they are going out and looking for work and jobs or taking the bus, are they going through that neighborhood where they bought? Have a strategy for that. You know, do they have to walk through when they got off of work, or if they were working, or every day at 5 o'clock when people were coming home from work, and they would go to the neighborhood bar or the neighborhood tienda or whatever it was, the panaderia, to hang out and BS and drink with friends. We need to know what that was like for them, so that when they go through, pass by, see the neighborhood, that they know that there may be a reaction and have a plan in place for taking care of it, because this is a trigger and can certainly start someone moving down into relapse mode. Okay. There's certain words, sounds, smells, and visuals. Visuals, people don't understand this, but visuals, as it's been explained to me, are bedspreads or pictures of someone or them and they were using at that time, or a painting. Smells could be aftershave or flowers or whatever. Sounds can be certain musics, or a bird chirping, or a car backfiring, and of course certain words that were used against them. Places can be, think about what it may feel like to go to the dentist, and what it may feel like to go to the doctor or the gynecologist, where most of the time you're laying down and somebody you do not know is placing hands on you or going to inject you with a needle. This is scary. This is scary. Again, we talked about music, food. Their food is a cultural, but it is also a mood inducer, and it carries memories. And family and friends, I don't know about anybody else's family and friends, but mine seem to remember everything negative about my past. And when they're testy with me, they throw it in my face. So how do you deal with that? And what are you going to do when you are seeing your family and friends? And think about that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now. Okay, boundaries. Boundaries with self and with others. I'm not talking about enmeshment here, but enmeshment was probably a survival skill, and the only way that a survivor knew how to make a friend. Especially with an abusive partner, enmeshment is about coercive control, and breaking free of that is going to be letting go of that idea is not going to happen unless a survivor knows that they will survive competently and excellently on their own. It may be hard, however, they're putting something else in place. So creating boundaries is a learned skill. And for more information on this, you can search the internet. My favorite resource for boundaries and how to make them comes from the Northwest Network. It's a toolkit they have on their website called It Takes a Village. And I love it. And if it's not free, and I think it is, you can download it. It's free or it's a penny. Relationships. Usually a survivor is unaware of the stress that they are placing on themselves and the relationship, due to the fact that at this point they may not have the tools and skills to negotiate their internal emotions and those that come up in a relationship. Very simple. If I say, hey, let's go out and get a cheeseburger, and you're a vegan and you don't know how, you are enmeshed with me and you want to make friends with me, and you think the only way you can do that is about enmeshing, you are not going to say to me, well, I'm a vegan. Do they serve a veggie burger there or a black bean burger there? Or try to negotiate a place where you can both get lunch. That's not going to happen. And so it's them stepping on themselves and then feeling badly afterwards for maybe they did order a cheeseburger, they did eat it, and now they feel terrible because they haven't eaten meat in who knows how long. Okay? But dating, people want to date. And dating is like the best compliment in the world. It's it makes you feel like hormonally good. Excuse me. It is fabulous. And it's like the best compliment ever. But it is also about stressful, about figuring out when to tell or not to tell a new dating partner about your past or your past relationships, about suddenly starting to crying or numbness, or maybe even promiscuity without even talking and establishing a friendship first. And sex, especially after being raped, has the same feelings of crying and numbness and maybe promiscuity, not to feel all those things, because sex is one of those natural needs that human beings have. So we need to remember that this is also going on internally within the survivor. Media, it could be TV, it could be social media, it could be the newspaper, it could be a radio show, it could be a news blurb about them or whatever. If their case is known on media or any case that is similar to theirs, that includes sexual assault or drug abuse, it's going to quite possibly be a trigger. If somebody puts out on social media or they put out on social media because something happened to them in the moment and they don't even remember, but it's a reaction like, oh my God, I can't believe, it's out there forever. All right. And people and trolls can pick up on it. My recommendation for media, at least initially, is to stay away from TV, to stay away from shows that have, and movies that are about violence or sexual assault or drug abuse. Movies like Train Spottings or shows like SVU, they're not good. I don't even watch them. I get mad because they're portrayed inappropriately. Anyway, unknown calls or communications that come in, like emails or text messages, instant messages, requests to be befriended on social media, those things, it may generate fear. Because it may be the perpetrator, or it could be the perp's families, distant family, family of friends, reporters, defense lawyers, or anybody trying to threaten them or get them to drop the case or something along those lines. Don't answer your phone. If you need to get a burner phone for a while and use that, great. Walking can also be a trigger, especially if the survivor has been stalked. But what is more common, I have found, with walking is that people are so involved in their cell phones and talking on it and texting that they forget the here and now, and they do not watch out for being in the here and now and not paying attention to what's in front of them, and that leaves them vulnerable. Put the phone and the social media away while you are walking in public. It is a polite thing to do, even if you are not in danger. Walking and not bumping into people or falling down and hurting yourself is important. Nobody in the grocery store wants to hear your saga. Put it away. Playfulness. Again, the body is a fabulous, efficient machine. And initially, playfulness releases neurochemicals that are very similar to those of fear. Playfulness initially is going to trigger a fear response. We know this now. We need to say that, and we need to not forget what that means to the survivor who is triggered, and that there's a lot of stress in their life, and that if they're out having fun and they feel the deer in the headlight feeling coming over them, then they need to proceed forward, and they need to proceed forward in a way that you have already talked about to calm themselves down and get themselves centered, whatever that is for them. What we are finding out more and more is about traumatic brain injuries, and basically that means anytime that there is a lack of oxygen to the brain, a traumatic brain injury occurs. And these are some of the examples of that. Blows to the head, either they've been punched in the head by an aggressive partner or the aggressor, or they've been pushed and they fell down and hit their head. Mild concussions, non-fatal overdoses. It's time that we start asking these questions of the of our survivors that we see. Is epilepsy been there? Have they had major surgery that required anesthesia? What is going on here? Because traumatic brain injuries are mostly go undiagnosed, and they are called hidden disabilities. This is not willfulness on the survivor's part. This is nothing that they can control. Advocates are not medically trained, not generally, and if there's an addict on your caseload, a recovering addict on your caseload who has dropped out of school, who is having problems staying with or remembering what you're saying and creating a safety plan, this might mean that a referral to a medical professional to screen for a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, may be in order. At least it's the best way to rule it out, as opposed to labeling somebody unfairly. All right, the first years of recovery can be an amazing experience. You know, months or years of hopelessness all of a sudden can turn into a ray of optimism, so that you know, this is something that has not been experienced in quite some time, in a long time. And you know, drugs, alcohol, the abusive partner were the masters that took away hopes and dreams. And hopes are high now that one is going to get through this and come to the other side of something big and bold for them. And that can be the truth. Although in the first year of recovery, there are a lot of don'ts. Again, I want to remind you that the big book is nothing more than a guide. All right, I'm going to go through these 9 don'ts, or do's and don'ts, quickly. Early recovery. First off, I want to say that there is no definition of what early recovery is. I believe, to use 12-step speak, that the addiction is sly. It's hiding. It's always awaiting for a vulnerable moment to take the person back into addiction. Sly and sneaky. All right. So there's no definition to what early recovery is. For some, it is a moment by moment each day. For some, it could be a minute by minute let go, have a few minutes off, or moment by moment off. It can be a day to day thing. It can be anything. You could have a happy, joyous 3 for 5 years, and then all of a sudden, for whatever the reasons are, there you go. You're back in your post-acute withdrawal syndrome, your pause. I talked about it extensively in 2. I'm not going to go on with it here, but we need to recognize that when pause stops showing up, the inability to think clearly, and the addict themselves are not going to realize. They're going to say, I feel foggy, I don't understand, my brain feels like mush, I'm not remembering anything, I'm having emotional overreactions, I'm not sleeping well, my physical coordination is off, you know, I'm sensitive to everything. This is what you're going to hear. This is pause. It is believed that it peaks between 3 and 24 months after the acute withdrawal. This is post. I can say, I believe from the people that I've worked with, I have seen people in recovery for 15, 20 years, and they have all of a sudden experienced, for whatever reasons, symptoms of pause and go back into using. Okay, there's no straight path to follow. Recovery is unique to each person. Whatever it is that they need to do in order to keep the individual survivor on their path, that is what they need to do. This is about them and how they want to inhabit their bodies. Sobriety is the job. A lot of time, this feels like just another added chore to what they already have to do. Their plate is full. Now this comes along, and it can cause resentment because they're being told that they have to go to X amount of meetings in X amount of days, especially like 90 meetings in 90 days, that they have to keep the focus on the future, that they have to find new sober friends, that they can't this, they can't that. This is a big don't list, you know, and to think that there's nothing that they can do about this, and that is horrible. And they begin to think that drinking is boring, which can lead to a string of stinking thinking, which ends up with the conclusion that not drinking is boring, I'm going back to drinking. Again, a lot of survivors read about recovery and what a great thing it is what a great thing sobriety is and what sober people do, and they begin to compare themselves to others by reading it or going to meetings and hearing how well things are going for people. You know, the question that I would ask at early recovery at this stage of the game is, what is it that the survivor wants in their life? What are they hearing when someone else speaks or they're reading somebody else's testimonial that stands out to them? And what would work to get that into their life? And problem solve around getting there. Okay, that's the future focused part of their sobriety job, is just to do it. And that to remind them that change takes time. This is slow. This is baby steps. They're building a support for themselves. And then first it's little things, and then they can add on to it. That's really, it doesn't seem, life without substance in it right now doesn't seem like a lot of fun. And, a couple of months ago or a year ago, they didn't even believe that they could live a day without a substance in their life. And where are they now? That's incredible. Okay. You've had the ability to abstain for this long, I would say to them. Whoa, that is a big, but they also compare it to, geez, that person is worse than I was. Maybe I can use a little bit. That's where we want to stay away from that, okay? All right. I talk about not just staying future focused, but the future focus also needs to include for the survivor that if you decide to use, in whatever way you decide to use, think about the known and unknown possibilities and consequences that may happen because of the abuse and how you're going to deal with them. That is really important. I talk about creating hobbies or creativities and hobbies because that is a way for many things, and I'm going to explain. What did the survivor think that they would have liked to have tried and never did while they were using? Was it cooking or fixing cars or making a quilt? Whatever that is, seemed maybe overwhelming and daunting at the time. Now let's keep it simple and find something free, like at the Agricultural Extension Agency or the agent, to come and give cooking classes. It's free. Join a book club at the library. It's free. A hiking club in your area. Being able to garden or grow flowers or your own vegetables. Being able to audit a class for free, and you can work this out with the local community college. You know, these are ways where people are not being judged. You're in a room with at least 10 other people who are all interested in the same thing. It is a non-threatening way to learn how to socialize and talk about interests and how people add different spices or make different meanings out of the classes that they're taking, they're sharing the same interests. And this is a great way to practice boundaries and to say to somebody, wow, let's continue the conversation. You want to go for coffee, or let's go sit outside and talk about this. This is important for them to have in their lives. They're also told not to make any major decisions. I don't know about anybody else, but I wear multiple hats during the day. I wear so many of them that I can't even keep track sometimes. I am constantly interrupted. And it, for me, can get very stressful very quickly. And I believe the same happens with the survivor, because they, especially in early recovery, are being asked, especially addicted survivors of sexual assault, they are being asked to make major decisions, which is stressful, on top of recovery, which is stressful. And this leads to a trigger upon trigger upon trigger. Some of the decisions an addicted survivor is usually making is whether A, to stay in an abusive relationship, B, procuring safe housing, B, C, getting a job, D, finding childcare if they have children. And if they have children, a subset of that is how do you exchange the children without talking or seeing the other parent, legal decisions, and a plethora more of other things, doctor's appointment, court appointments, all these things that add on one on top of the other. These are major decisions. Ask the survivor how they want to approach the decision. The bottom line is that a survivor does not have to do, or usually doesn't have to do, anything that they aren't comfortable with the exception, legal. If they are mandated to go to court, they are mandated to go to court. If a judge issues a subpoena, they need to respond to that subpoena. Those are the only things. If a child exchange is mandated, that needs to happen. Focus on those things before you start doing the others. Taking small steps to see what it feels like and then make another decision is a great way for someone to move forward. Okay, it is also common, I've seen this with people I've worked with, I have seen this also with my friends and family, that when they stop one addiction, they also set goals for stopping others. So I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to eat clean, I'm going to exercise more. Hold your horses. There's no need to do everything at once. One goal at a time. A new goal can be added once a stated goal is achieved. And doing it this way can keep the survivors focused and successful. And there is nothing better like achievement to bolster someone's self-esteem. All right. They say, don't isolate and don't hang out with old friends. I've said it before that there are few people in this world who can push your buttons with more speed and efficiency than old friends and your families. All right. However, what if the partner was their physical abuser and the controller of their substance abuse? What if the partner isolated the survivor from their families and their friends and their support? So much so that the family and friends and anybody who could provide support, when they leave the partner, don't feel like they're going to welcome the survivor back into their world because they've seen this. This is not the first rodeo, which in a lot of cases is true. So ask the survivor, what do they do for holidays? How are they celebrated? How are birthdays celebrated? Especially if you're feeling lonely and scared and vulnerable and you want to be included, these are some ideas that the survivors have shared. When they're invited to parties, they arrive early, socialize while people are generally sober, and leave before the use, quotes, and this is their words to me, gets out of hand. They've seen friends, they leave. They get caught up, they leave. Some of them keep their car keys and a cell phone close at hand at all times. Their car keys to tell them that they have a means of escape. They just get in their car and go. They also keep bus passes or fares for buses in their pockets at all times. And they use the telephone. They walk out, they use their cell phones either for telephone therapy, which is a 12-step thing, or to use it to call a Lyft or an Uber if they don't have a car. All right, they go for a walk. They breathe in air. They ground themselves by going outside and noticing things and get centered in their body. They find a person who is at the event who can act as a support for them, who is active, but they have to do it. They have to ask the person if they're willing to be their support. If they get triggered, can they come to them and say, I am triggered? And the support person can say, let's get a glass of water, let's go outside, drink your water, remember to breathe. Something that simple, but they need to talk about that, okay? If you share children and you need to exchange the children, exchange it in a public place. Do not do it at your mother-in-law's house. Do not do it at his friends, at the partner's house, the children's other parents' house. Do not exchange children in those homes, period, for safety reasons to begin with, okay? Do it somewhere in a neutral setting in public. And it's best to have somebody with you who can be a support, like a friend. I know it's icky, but if they can ask and do it, that's fine. All right. All right. Mistakes are going to happen. We need to realize that. So help the survivor problem solve and, what is it that they're missing and how can they make that work? For some people, and again, this is something else that they have told me, is that when they were with their partners, they would come home from work, they would pop open a beer or they'd fix a drink and they'd talk about what their day was like and they fix dinner together, and that's something they're missing. What can the survivor do now to fill that gap for them so that they feel better? Okay, they're told to make sober new friends. Meeting new people is stressful and it's hard work for some people, especially if you're an introvert and especially if you're hurting. And it's going to put you outside of your comfort zone. And most, not all, but most survivors of sexual assault and addiction overthink and drama, or overthinking and drama are part of their makeup, and that is now part of the past. So it's going to be hard to understand how to do this without overthinking and over dramatizing a friendship. Friendships take time. They just take time. What the survivor can do is they can start by making a list of the qualities that they look for or want in a friend, and then make a list of qualities that they believe they bring to a friendship. And based on this list, which person that they know of or they see is a good fit. This can include family and old friends and new people that they are meeting. And then if they decide that this is a good fit, they can think of ways to connect to build a friendship with them and go out and build a web of support for themselves, getting the rest that they need, the hydration that they need, and the sustenance that they need to move forward. So going for coffee with someone to talk about a mutual interest, joining a group or a club, like if the survivor has children, do they have a spring rummage sale? Can they get on the committee and help with that? Can they join a book club? Whatever it is it in their interest? Does it make it work? And they may find out that they don't like the book club that they thought they might like. That's great. You learned something. Maybe it's not your interest, so maybe a gardening club or a book club about gardening is what is needed. That kind of stuff. Okay. I want to say a word about support groups. Support groups provide great opportunities for discussing struggles in a safe environment and to help the survivor realize that they are not alone. That is really the power and the glory of 12-step meetings. People share their personal stories. They talk about their experiences, their strengths, their hopes, and everybody sits in silence and listens to that person talk without being interrupted. That's important initially for anyone to hear, because as an adjunct to counseling or advocacy, it is wonderful to know that you're not alone, that other people have solved problems in different ways, and maybe you can take some of those suggestions, what you've heard, and use it in your own life. Okay, we talked about dating and romance. I don't really want to go into that anymore, except to say that with a little neurobiology again, the amygdala and the hippocampus and the frontal lobes, the frontal lobe of the cortex are all sensitive to and reinforcing of behaviors that include pleasure and cause the brain to produce dopamine, the feel-good transmitter. And this causes a motivation to pursue and keep pursuing and requiring the reward. The dopamine activates the reward circuit, helping to make dating a pleasurable experience, similar to the pleasure associated with substance abuse. Understand why they say that dating should not happen within the first year? I'm going to tell you it happens every time you get into a relationship. It doesn't matter whether you're a year, a month, or 20 years out. Okay? This is going to be true across their lifespans. So I just want to do that. Love also, or when we think that we're falling in love, deactivates the neural pathways responsible for negative emotions, okay, like fear and social judgment, which are necessary for critical assessments. This is what I believe every single survivor needs to know about dating and falling in love. All right, secrets. They say you're as sick as your secrets. It's hard to tell people that you are no longer drinking, when and where you choose to, or using, and when and where you choose to do that, or when and where the survivor chooses to do that, is their decision. It's embarrassing to tell people just how much you use and what you did while using. All right? One of the main tenets of a 12-step program is to show up and tell the truth in the meeting, not outside of the meeting and not with unsafe people. When people open up, when anybody opens up and shares who they are, this can invite judgment. And until someone has the internal strength to not let other people's judgments bother them so much, then it's okay. But just by telling the truth, they're taking a huge risk outside of the recovery rooms, okay? It's going to impact their lives, and they know it. So you don't need, people don't need to explain, addicts don't need to explain why they're not using anymore. And if they do, they can tend to lie, which may cause regrets later on down the road, all right? So secrets are sticky wicket. They can unite and divide people. If someone shares that they are in the program or that they've used to a stranger, someone may come back and say, you know, I'm in the program too, and that's great. Or someone can say, you know, I had a brother or a sister who is still using, I don't even talk to them, blah, 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 and they've already have a judgment on you because you did use. So it's painful and destructive at the same time, and it can be uniting, okay? What the survivor needs to think through is when is the right time to tell, to rehearse the way it will be told that they do it, and to respect the reaction of the listener and to cut it off if they are feeling threatened in any way. Okay, and to also understand that the reaction of the listener is about the listener and not about the survivor. Urges. Oh my goodness, this is a big one. Urges can be triggered by anything in the world, from a bad day to an argument to breaking up to getting fired, illness, death, spilling coffee, your morning coffee, forgetting to buy or make coffee, being late for work, whatever it is. Triggers can be anything, and they cause urges because this is what the body does. All right, I want to tell you that as we're focusing on one addiction at a time in very early recovery, that drinking, booze, is laden with carbs and sugars. And when one stops drinking, they are facing a trippy whammy of withdrawals. It's not just the drugs, it's the sugar and carbs they're detoxing to as well. So it is the law to keep the ice cream in your freezer and eat it. This may be at odds with the goal to be healthy and to lose weight. As I said before, one addiction at a time. Eventually, the survivor will learn how to manage triggers in another way, and the use of sugar and carbs will decrease, and they can go on that diet and exercise and get on with their recovery in other ways. But again, I'm going to say sugar and carbs are essential in early recovery. Okay. Basically, have fun. However, the survivor is working extremely hard to stay sober, and it is exhausting. And we, the support group, the advocates, the counselors, their support group, need to emphasize this over and over and over again, that they are working hard at this, and they have to balance that out with some kind of fun and relaxation or play. And that's scary because of what it feels like initially inside. The body interprets it as fear and triggers stuff. But you know what? They can push through it. They can drink a glass of water and say, this is okay. But fun does not have to be a big chunk of time. It can be something totally unelaborate as turning on the radio or putting a tape in and dancing around your room for 15 minutes. It can be playing with your pet. It can be watching a funny TV show. It can be calling someone up and asking them to tell you a joke. Whatever it is fun. It is something different. It's something that uplifts your spirit. Okay. If change is going to happen, I love this one. If change is going to happen, we're going to have to speak outside of the guidelines, and we're going to have to take a break. We're going to have to break a few boundaries. And in order for this to happen, we have to know what the guidelines are so we can speak outside of them. And we have to know where the boundaries are so we can break them in a safe way. All right. I want to talk about emotional safety planning, because we talk about physical planning and we forget that the internal safety is where it all starts for the survivor. That is what they are seeking. being inside of themselves right now does not feel safe or comfortable, and they don't want to be there. They want to escape, and I get that. And I think we all need to get that. I also believe that once a person feels safe in their own skin, all else is going to follow. It is a very slow process, and ultimately it's about developing a personalized plan which helps the survivor accept their emotions and their decisions. And so where we're going to go like that is we're going to talk about creating a safety plan first. And once that has been established, it's time to make an emotional safety plan. Just like a physical safety plan, an emotional safety plan is a living document. As the needs and circumstances of the survivor's life changes, so should the safety planning on both levels. Time to revisit, revise, delete, or add to whatever it needs to be. And these are the steps that I believe take place in a safety plan. First is the emotional safety. Many isolate from friends and family, preparing them with, they pepper them with unrelenting times negative psychological and verbal attacks, and that can find its way into the survivor's self-talk. And this can make it hard for survivors to actually do anything. If you are told from, I don't know, however long it is, that you are stupid and you're worthless and you're nothing but a user, and that's not good. At some point, all survivors, and I think every human being, feels emotionally unstable and or sad. And this is a natural reaction as you go through recovery. It's it's often hard to acknowledge feelings and to learn how to deal with them and to move on. Some feelings may take a moment to resolve, and others may take years. And this is why survivors need to discuss their feelings in safe places with safe people. And from time to time, that may include therapy. And that's not a bad thing. This is where they learn to help themselves and to learn how to guard and to protect their emotional health. You know, everyone deserves to feel safe while they're expressing themselves and their opinions, and that is a good thing. And we talked about why why 12-step groups are great to go to talk about it, because no one there is really going to judge you. But we need to create those webs of support. We've got mixed feelings. You know, children go through this at early stages. They love their parents and they alternately hate them because they didn't let them do this, that, or the other, but they love them and they don't want to be alone. So, you know, that's the same, having the mixed feelings of wanting to be together, feeling guilty about leaving, feeling guilty about staying, knowing they had to leave, wishing that the person who inflicted the abuse on them burns in hell, but then does not want them to suffer any harm. This is all natural, and it's all very confusing, and it's all part of the process of moving through. Okay, the children, we don't talk about it a lot, but the children, if they share children with the abuser, the children are going to probably talk about missing the other parent, not liking where they're living now, wishing they had this or that, or their other parent always buys them toys or feeds them or gets them the nice things, which can create even stronger feelings of guilt and regret, especially if the survivor is facing homelessness and poverty. When making an emotional support plan with the survivor, include the children in it, and include not just parenting classes for the parent, but include parenting classes that include parents and children, so they each hear the same thing and learn how to communicate that with each other, so that they have a pathway forward for discussing issues in their home without saying hateful, horrible things to each other. Okay? Because our job is to help to support the parent, and it is a parent's job to support the emotion of their children while reinforcing the value of a safe, respectful, loving environment. Okay. Creating a peaceful space. The space can be anywhere, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in your home. It can be going for a walk, sitting under a tree, a chair by the window, looking out at out of your window at a site that you like. It can be standing, doing the dishes and letting the water run over your hands. It can be a peaceful place. I think of the vision that's coming to my mind right now is the mom who's lying on the bathroom floor eating cookies, and the kids are banging on the door and they're going, "Mom, are you in there?" And the mom goes in dad's voice, "No, it's dad." And they run away. Give yourself that peaceful space when you need it. Take that for yourself, because that is kindness to self. And it's completely okay to take the time needed to make the choice that is right for you, or the decisions, decision. Whatever it is, it's the right. You can write messages to yourself. You can let your mantra be, "I matter," and how I feel matters, and it doesn't matter. And it can be that you say that as you're walking out the door each morning, and that's the only time that you say it during the day. You know what? You did it. That's what's important here. That, for the survivor to remind themselves that they are doing the best that they can, and they're making the decisions that are best for them and their family, and that they are taking chances and creating safety by maintaining their sobriety. That is a huge accomplishment. Okay. People affected by trauma often wonder what's wrong with them, and if they have trouble processing the information or making a safety plan. I'm going to repeat, this may be due to an undiagnosed TBI or PTSS. Get them to a medical professional who can screen for that. Because quite frankly, life comes with risks, or people end up staying at home and they watch life on TV, and that's not necessarily cool. All right. I stole this, that's not it. I co-opted this from some research, and this is about solution-focused therapy. I'm not going to go into it, but I've modified it for doing some case management. Everybody exhibits competent behavior. Everyone is an expert on their own needs. Everyone has the strength and skills and internal resources to meet their needs, and there are exceptions, which means there are times when those problems do not affect the survivor. The goals are the keys to change, and the goals must be concrete and specific, and change is made in small, discernible, concrete, specific effects. They are all future focused, goal directed, and focused on the solution, not on the problem. All right? They're capable and competent. They have the capacity to change. They will focus on the desired outcome. They'll draw on their strengths, and they will keep it simple. Okay, flipping the script, which basically means focus on what is working rather than on the problem, and asking questions, not having the answer. So when they hear themselves say it's too complicated, the flip is, I'm going to look at it from a different angle, or I'm going to talk to so-and-so and get their point of view on it. I don't have the resources. Necessity is the mother of invention. What can I do? I'm not going to get any better at it. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try it in a different way. Whatever it is, they can do it. The hope and expectancy piece of this. Remember, I used to make my clients write down what the wise old woman 20 years, 30 years from now would tell this person in the here and now, what they've learned. I flipped that around. What would I do if I believed becoming a nurse was possible? Keep it in the here and now. And let's get some goals out of that. And let that be part of the, the planning, your therapy planning, whatever it is, your case management planning, on what it is that they believe is possible in the here and now, because it is. Okay. Okay. So for safety is more than a physical space. I'm sorry, I'm just going to cough and I didn't. And abstinence is not sobriety. Sobriety is being present in the here and now. And safety is more than a physical space. It is feeling comfortable in your own body while being sober, that the survivor knows that they have the tools and skills to move forward. That is all that it is. If you are not abstinent from your stinking thinking, from your trauma and your overthinking, you are not in sobriety. You are merely clean. You are not sober. Okay. Tips to keep survivors coming back to a group. It's not just easy access to the support group. It's about the transportation to and from. It's about the time that it's offered. It's about the day that it's offered. It's about screening in as opposed to screening out. It is about prioritizing childcare and having volunteers or having babysitters there to help with the child care, that we're having food. And I'm not talking snacks, I'm talking sandwiches that a sandwich shop donates, or pizza or something like that, and drinks and decaf and coffee. Very important. It's having enough support for not just the survivors, but for the group leader, the person who is leading it. I can remember a time where I started a group on child development, and one of the parents in there totally lost it because I had hit a nerve with something, and I was the only one there, and it was one of the most horrible experiences I've ever had. Okay, because unexpected issues do come up. I love the fact that survivors can create their own resource and referral book and then share it with the bigger group, and to keep a big binder inside where people can put their referrals, and you can, have somebody maybe once a month, it's their month to keep it and organize it in a way that has like food and shelter and clothing and babysitting, and where they can get classes and blah, 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 whatever it is, a plumber or an electrician or whatever tools and skills they need. But for general tips, for advocates who work with addicted survivors of sexual assault, we have to know and be aware of IPV, substance abuse, 12-step philosophy, the dynamics of all three, the intersections of all three, and when to step up and when to step back on whatever needs doing. In other words, if someone comes to you and says, I need someone to hear my 4-step, and I want you to do it with me, understand that is not your role. That is the role of a sponsor. And also understand that a 4-step can take all day long. That is not for advocates or in any role to do. That is when you step back and refer to the 12-step group. If a substance abuse issue has come up and you're doing IVP work, step back and get the substance abuse counselor in there or advocate in there, because that's what they need. Or vice versa, you're doing substance abuse work and IVP comes up, the step back again. No, create that safety net for yourself, for your survivors, have the necessary paperwork like the informed consent especially between the substance abuse counselor and the IPD counselor, advocates, we need to have those clear. How does it move? What's the flexibility to get from one to the other easily and accessible? And that's why I say, for everybody to get on with this general advocacy tips, it is a copy machine, a fax, a telephone, the internet. So advocates can have instant access to some problem that is coming up or getting something that they need from another person in the survivor's services or their service plan. And for the survivor to get it as well. What if they need to enroll their children in a new school and they forgot to get a copy of their vaccines? That's important. How do you get that, and how do you get that quickly? So that's our time for today. I appreciate each one of you being here, and if you need me and you want to talk, here are some of the resources that I use, and here's how you get in touch with me. Again, thank you for your time and your attention, and again, good luck, and I'm always here. Bye-bye.